Tuesday after my daughter-in-law's birthday party, I called my financial advisor. "Helene," I said, "I want to change the beneficiary designations. All of them." She didn't ask why. Helene has known me for 19 years. She just said, "I'll have the paperwork ready by Thursday." I hung up the phone and stood in my kitchen for a long moment. Outside my window, the birch trees along the back fence were just starting to turn. October in Oakville, my favorite time of year. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down at the table where I've sat every morning for 31 years, in the house I bought myself. And I thought about a watch. Let me back up. I should tell you who I am, or who my daughter-in-law thinks I am. My name is Audette. I'm 67 years old. For 22 years, I worked as a library technician at the Halton District School Board. I retired at 62. I drive a 2009 Civic with a dent above the rear left wheel well that I keep meaning to get fixed. I buy my clothes at Winners, and I clip coupons from the Foodland flyer on Thursdays. I bring a thermos of coffee to doctor's appointments because I don't like paying $4 for a cup at the Tim Hortons in the lobby. This is what my son's wife sees when she looks at me. What she does not see, what very few people see, is the rest of it. My mother was a practical woman. She grew up during a time when you kept your money quiet and your opinions quieter. She worked as a seamstress out of our house in Burlington for 40 years, and she saved every dollar she didn't absolutely need to spend. When she passed in 2003, she left me her house, her savings, and a handwritten note that said, "Don't let anyone see the bottom of your purse." I took that advice to heart. I didn't sell the Burlington house. I rented it. Then I bought a small bungalow in Waterdown, also rented. Over the years, carefully, without fanfare, I added to what she'd left me. A triplex in Hamilton. A unit in a building in Guelph. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would make anyone look twice. By the time my son married Simone, I had accumulated just over $4.3 million in property and registered assets. He didn't know. Why would he? I'm his mother, not his accountant. And I raised him to understand that money is private, that you don't speak about what you have. That generosity is something you do quietly or not at all. He used to understand that. His name is my son, and I am not going to call him anything else in this story, because what he did at that party is still sitting in my chest like a stone, and using his name feels more than I can give right now. He married Simone 4 years ago. She came from a family in North York. Her father runs a chain of dental clinics. Her mother does something in luxury real estate. They're the kind of people who discuss their renovation budget at dinner and look around the table to make sure everyone heard. I tried. I want to be clear about that. I tried with Simone for 4 years. I brought food when they moved into their house in Mississauga. I babysat their daughter, my granddaughter, every Wednesday. I never complained. I never asked for anything. But Simone had decided very early on what I was. A woman who clipped coupons. A retired library technician. A guest bedroom obligation. She was polite the way people are polite to the cashier at the grocery store. Present, efficient, and not particularly interested. I told myself it was fine. Some people are like that. Not everyone is warm. The birthday party was a Saturday in September. Simone turned 40. Her parents had organized a dinner at a restaurant in Etobicoke, the kind of place that doesn't put prices on the menu and calls everything composed. 20 people, her family, a few couples they socialized with, and me. I had thought carefully about what to bring. I am not a person who gives gift cards. I find them impersonal. And I wanted to give something that meant something, not just to fill a bag with tissue paper. My mother had a watch, a Gruen Precision from 1962. She wore it every day until her hands got too swollen with arthritis to close the clasp. It kept perfect time. It was the most elegant thing she owned, and she was not a woman who owned many elegant things. When she left it to me, I had it serviced and kept it in a small velvet box in my jewelry drawer. I wore it once at a function and realized it didn't feel right on my wrist. It had always been hers. I thought about who should have it next. Simone, I decided, not because I was trying to impress her or buy her affection, but because I thought I genuinely believed that giving her something irreplaceable might bridge something between us. And because my mother would have appreciated a woman who ran her household the way Simone ran hers, whatever I thought of her manners, I wrapped it carefully. I wrote a card explaining what it was, who it had belonged to, and why I was giving it to her. The dinner went the way those dinners go. Her mother talked about a property she'd sold in Rosedale. Her father made a joke about interest rates that everyone laughed at. My son sat across from me and smiled whenever our eyes met, the way he does when he's hoping everyone is getting along. When it came time for gifts, Simone opened mine near the end. She lifted the velvet box from the tissue, opened it, and looked at the watch. Then she looked up at me. Then back at the watch. "A watch?" she said. "From the 80s?" She wasn't asking. Her voice had a particular quality I'd heard once or twice before, the same tone she used with the contractor who put the bathroom tiles in slightly crooked. "It's from 1962, I said. "It was my mother's." "Oh." She set the box down on the table. Not gently. "That's okay." She turned to the next gift. No one said anything. I looked at my son. He picked up his wine glass and looked at the table. That was the moment. Not Simone's response. I had prepared myself in some dim corner of my heart for the possibility that she wouldn't understand. But my son, who I had driven to hockey practice at 5:30 in the morning for 7 years. My son, who I had sat beside in the hospital when he had his appendix out at 14 and was more frightened than he would ever admit. My son, who I had helped through university, through a breakup that nearly broke him, through the first terrifying years of becoming a father. He looked at the table. I finished my water. I found my coat. I said goodnight to the table, thanked the host, and left. In the car, I sat for a few minutes before starting the engine. Then I drove home to Oakville. I didn't call him that night. I made myself wait. The truth is, I'm not an impulsive person. I don't make large decisions when I'm hurt. My mother taught me that too. But I am a patient person, and patient people, when they finally decide something, tend to mean it. I thought about it for 3 days. I thought about the look on Simone's face, not even contempt, which would have been more honest, but dismissal. The particular cruelty of being set aside. I thought about my son's hands on his wine glass. I thought about my granddaughter, who is 3 years old and calls me Mare, and who I read to every Wednesday on the couch under the quilt my mother made. And then on Tuesday morning, I called Helene. "All of it?" she asked. "The beneficiary designations, yes. I want to restructure through the family trust. And I want to revisit the estate plan. I can have someone from the legal side call you this week. Thursday is fine." I also called my property manager in Hamilton and asked him to prepare an updated summary of the rental income statements, not because I needed them, because when you are about to make a significant decision, you look at the whole picture. $4.3 million, 22 years of a library technician's salary, carefully saved. My mother's house, decades of rental income reinvested. RSPs maxed every year from age 40 onwards. A TFSA that had been growing quietly since the program launched. None of it visible. None of it in anything that would show up in a casual Google search or a conversation at a dinner party. My son had no idea. His wife had even less. My son called on Wednesday. "Mom." He had the voice he gets when he knows he should have done something and didn't. I've known that voice for 38 years. About Saturday. "Yes, Simone." "She's not always." She was a bit overwhelmed. 40 is a big birthday, you know how she gets. I let a pause sit there for a moment. "The watch was my mother's," I said. "I gave it to her because I thought she would appreciate it. I wrote it all in the card." "I know. Did you read the card?" Silence. "Did Simone read the card?" "Mom." It's a yes or no question. She appreciates the thought, I don't think she does," I said. "And I don't think you do either. Or you would have said something at the table." He went quiet in a different way after that. Not the guilty quiet, the defensive quiet. "You always do this," he said. "You make things into something bigger than they are." I didn't argue. There was nothing to argue about. "I'm going to need some time," I said. I'll be in touch. I hung up. The estate lawyer, whose name is Bertrand, came to my house on Friday afternoon. We sat at the kitchen table with tea. I didn't offer to warm up, and a folder I prepared with the documents Helene had sent. You're looking at restructuring the trust, he said. Yes. I want to remove my son as primary beneficiary of the personal assets. I'd like to establish a direct trust for my granddaughter, education and health only, administered by Helene until she's 25. Bertrand looked at me the way lawyers look at clients who are making large decisions while sitting very calmly. This is a significant change, he said. Yes. Are you certain? I wouldn't have called you if I wasn't. He nodded and opened his folder. We worked for 2 hours. It was, in the end, not complicated. I had been organized for years. The trust structure was already partially in place because I'm the kind of person who plans ahead. When he left, I stood at the window and watched his car back out of the driveway. The birch trees had turned fully by then, yellow and gold and a little bit of brown at the edges. 3 weeks later, my son came to the house. He called first. He has enough manners for that. He arrived on a Sunday afternoon with a container of soup from the Portuguese place I like in Burlington, which told me that he'd been thinking about what to say and had decided that bringing something was important. I let him in. I put the soup in the fridge. We sat at the kitchen table. I owe you an apology, he said. Yes, I said. He blinked. I think he expected me to make it easier. I should have said something at the table, he said. I know that. I knew it when it was happening, and I didn't do it anyway. And I've been thinking about that for 3 weeks, and I don't have a good reason for it. I didn't. And I'm sorry. I looked at him for a moment. This son of mine, 38 years old with his father's jaw and my stubbornness and a heart that is genuinely good, even when he lets people talk him out of using it. Thank you for saying that, I said. Simone, I'm not asking about Simone. He stopped. I'm talking to you, I said. Simone is your wife. That's between you and her. What I'm asking about is you. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that the furnace clicked on and off in the basement. I think, he said slowly, I've let myself see you the way she sees you. And I've known that wasn't right, and I haven't fixed it. No, I said, you haven't. I'm sorry, Mom. I know you are. We sat there for a while. I got up and put the kettle on because it was something to do with my hands. I did not tell him about the changes to the estate plan that day. That felt like the wrong reason to apologize, and I wanted to be sure he was apologizing for the right reasons. But there was something else I needed to tell him, something I should have told him years ago. I brought my tea to the table and I said, I need to show you something. I went to the office and came back with the folder Helene had sent, not the estate documents, but the summary sheet, the one with the property list and the total. I set it in front of him. He looked at it. He didn't say anything for a long time. Mom, he finally said. This is $4.3 million, I said. Approximately. It changes a little with the markets. I had no idea. I know. Why didn't you tell me? I thought about my mother's note. Don't let anyone see the bottom of your purse. Because I wanted you to see me, I said, not what I had. And for a long time, you did. He understood what I meant. He's not a slow man. She put the watch down, he said quietly. Yes, and she didn't read the card. No, he rubbed his face with both hands. That gesture he's had since he was 12 years old, and something was more than he could hold. I'm so sorry, he said. And this time it meant something different, something larger. I know, I said. But I need you to understand that sorry is the beginning, not the end. I've made some decisions. I want you to know about them, not because I want to punish you, because you deserve to know. I told him about the trust for his daughter. I told him about the presticiary changes. I told him that nothing was permanent and nothing was intended as a punishment, but that I needed to know that when he stood up for me, when the moment came and it asked something of him, he would stand up. He didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He said, "That's fair." We talked for another hour after that. He ate the soup, eventually. I had some too. He told me things I hadn't known, that the years since the wedding had been harder than he'd shown, that Simone's family had a way of making him feel like everything he'd come from was smaller than it was, and that he had let that feeling take up more space than it should have, that he missed how things used to be between us before he'd started seeing me through someone else's eyes. I didn't make it easy, but I didn't make it impossible either. Before he left, he stopped in the doorway and looked at the birch trees in the backyard. "Do you still have the watch?" he asked. "Yes, I'd like to give it to Lily myself one day," he said, "when she's old enough to know what it means." Lily is my granddaughter. I looked at him for a moment, and I thought about my mother, who was also a woman people underestimated and who left behind more than anyone expected, not just in money, but in the kind of understanding that takes a long time to earn. "Then we have some time," I said, "and you have some work to do." He nodded. He hugged me on the doorstep, a real hug, not the kind he'd give at parties. I watched him drive away, and then I went inside and washed the cups. Simone called 2 weeks later. I'll be honest with you, I was surprised. She is not the type of woman who makes herself uncomfortable willingly. "I wanted to apologize," she said, "about the party. I was rude." "Yes," I said. "You were." A pause. She wasn't used to that either. My son told me about the watch, what it was. I didn't read the card. "I know. I'm sorry about that." It was a short apology, not a warm one. But it was real, in the way that things said by people who are not used to saying them can be real. Clipped, and a little stiff and sincere, in spite of itself. "Thank you for calling," I said. We didn't talk long. I didn't invite her to coffee. Some bridges take longer than a phone call to mend, and I have not lived 67 years by pretending otherwise. But I appreciated that she called. I want to be fair about that. There are people who will hear this and say I should have told him years ago, about the money, the properties, all of it, that I was setting him up to fail by keeping him in the dark. Maybe. I've thought about that. But here is what I know. When my mother died and left me that house and that note, I understood something she had been trying to teach me my whole life, that who you are is not what you own, that the person who gets up at 5:30 to drive a child to hockey practice at -15 is not a lesser person than the one who discusses Rosedale real estate over composed plates. That dignity does not require an audience or a balance sheet. I wanted my son to know that in his bones, not just in theory. I thought he did. He lost track of it for a while. People do when they fall in love with someone who sees the world differently. But he found his way back. That, to me, is worth something. The watch is still in the velvet box in my jewelry drawer. Some days I take it out and look at it. The second hand moves in that steady, unhurried way that old watches have, like it has all the time in the world and knows exactly what to do with it. I think my mother would find this whole story very satisfying. She always said that the truth has a way of becoming visible eventually. You don't have to hurry it. You just have to be patient. I have always been patient, and I'm still here. I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be seen, not noticed, not acknowledged in a polite passing way, actually seen, the way my son used to see me before he started looking at me through someone else's eyes. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes when the person who should know you best looks at you and sees only the surface. The 2009 Civic, the winter's coat, the thermos of coffee, and decides that's the whole story. What happened at that dinner table in Etobicoke wasn't just rudeness. I've met rude people. I've managed rude people for 67 years without losing much sleep. What it was really was a choice. Simone made one, and my son made one. And the choices people make in small, unguarded moments tend to be the truest ones they ever make. I don't say that to be hard on him. I say it because it's what I've observed in a long life, that how you treat someone when you think it costs you nothing is exactly who you are. There's no pretending around it. You can explain it later, contextualize it, apologize for it, and my son did genuinely, but the moment itself doesn't change. What I did in the days after was not revenge. I want to be clear about that. I didn't change those beneficiary designations to punish anyone. I changed them because I finally understood that I had been waiting, passively, patiently, for my son to see me clearly again, and that waiting without consequence is just hoping. And I am not, at 67, a woman who hopes without also acting. The trust I set up for my granddaughter Lily is the most honest thing in this whole story. Whatever happens between me and her parents, whatever gets repaired or doesn't, she will have something solid, an education, a foundation. Something built by a woman she will one day know as her grandmother, who clipped coupons and drove a dented Civic and owned $4.3 million in property that nobody saw coming. That's the part that matters most to me now. Because here is what I know after all of it: the way you build something quietly, over decades, without asking for recognition, that is a form of integrity. It's not dramatic. Nobody writes about it while it's happening. But it accumulates, it compounds, and eventually, when the moment comes that requires it, you find out exactly what you've been building and whether it holds. My son found his way back. I believe that was in him all along, waiting to be chosen. He just needed to understand that the choosing was required of him, that love, real love, is not a permanent condition that exists regardless of what you do. It is something you tend to. Something you earn and keep earning by standing up when it costs you something to do it. Simone called. That surprised me. Stiff and short as it was, she called. I respect that more than I would have respected a warm apology she didn't mean. My mother's watch is still in its velvet box. I take it out sometimes. The second hand moves in that quiet, certain way, steady, unhurried, keeping perfect time the way it always has. I think she would have found the whole thing rather satisfying. She used to say, "Live so that the truth of you is larger than what anyone assumes. Let the gap between what they think they know and what is actually true do its own quiet work." It does, eventually. It always does.